Here's what's cooking on the day's Sports Stove podcast. We're talking about Juwan Howard and his another failure that he had going on this weekend. We're going to give you the recap of the Daytona 500. We're going to talk a little NFL, a little college football, and Major League Baseball fantasy baseball pitcher rankings. All that's coming to you next on the Sports Stove podcast.
From Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network, you're listening to the Sports Stove podcast with your host, Vince Stover.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
Welcome into an all-new Sports Stove podcast presented by Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live. Last night, Sunday night, for the first time this season, we started Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live. Kevin Wilson and I co-host the show. We're actually going to bring you a clip from that show later on in this episode, but we break down at 8 p.m. every Sunday night. We're starting with player rankings, and then we'll get into a draft and all kinds of stuff throughout the season to keep you up to date on what you need to know for fantasy baseball, ads, drops, all those kinds of things as well. Great episode to start off the season on Sunday night, and hopefully you'll get the whole episode. But like I said, we are going to give you some of that episode today, our pitcher rankings, starting pitcher rankings that we did in that show. I'm going to play that for you here in just a few minutes. But make sure you follow Belly Up Fantasy on Twitter and Facebook and stay up to date on all the things going on with that show. What an interesting weekend we had. We're going to start this episode off talking about immature adults. Kind of getting tired of it. Maybe you are as well. It's interesting because I earlier this weekend, I made a comment on Twitter about not Kyler Murray, but now I don't remember who it was, but about professional athletes removing all pictures on Instagram of their current team. And I find it interesting that we have these adults that are getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. The pettiness that they show by deleting pictures of them in their uniform, disassociating with their team because they won't meet their demands or because they made them upset about something that they said. It doesn't change the fact that for however many years they played for those teams, and in doing so, they have good memories, teammates who they've said that they loved and that they played hard for and that they cared about. And now they take all the pictures away, making sure no one can find, at least on their personal page, any sign of them playing for that team. It's embarrassing, really, to watch adults act this way. It is explains a lot about the way our society is today, when the millionaires are petty in this degree, and these guys that have quite the life for themselves for, again, playing a game. And the immaturity just shows through over and over again with these athletes. Yet this weekend, it showed through with a coach, a college basketball coach, a Big Ten college basketball coach, the University of Michigan's basketball coach, Juwan Howard. Juwan Howard has been thought of as a leader. He was, in his later years in the NBA, was a valuable veteran on his teams. Now he has a second incident. He had one last year and now in one this year where in the postgame line, he said something to Coach Gard from Wisconsin, at which time the coach from Wisconsin put his hand on Juwan Howard, which did not help the situation. And then Howard and him started jawing back and forth. Before long, there was a large crowd, and it did not take long for Juwan Howard to reach over and smack an assistant coach at Wisconsin in the side of the head. It's interesting because I'm watching as so many people are trying to explain away Juwan Howard's actions, why he did it, and kind of to some degree, and they haven't come out and just bluntly said this, but why Juwan Howard should not get in trouble. Whereas other people have wisely said there are definitely multiple issues here, not just Juwan Howard, but Juwan Howard is the only one who swung, slapped, whatever you want to call it, someone else in this skirmish. Therefore, Juwan Howard is the one that needs to get in the most trouble. He deserves discipline. He deserves punishment. What that will be, I don't know. Will the university come in and suspend him multiple games? Will the Big Ten suspend him multiple games? Will the NCAA suspend him? I don't know who all, and at the time of this, we don't know yet the answers to these questions. But he's a head basketball coach, a former NBA player, a former Division I athlete. He has many years under his belt and much experience. He is a good coach. He is trying to rebuild a program who had some good history. But now, for the second time in 2 years, he has allowed his temper to go further than what is acceptable on a basketball court. Will someone scream and yell? Will someone get so infuriated that they get a technical? Sure. Are there coaches who get upset at other coaches for something they did in the game and don't shake their hand going through the line? I think that's ridiculous, but yes, it happens. In this case, Juwan Howard said he was not happy with Wisconsin calling a timeout at the end of the game. You know, like when they were being pressed and the full court down 15 with their backups in, and they were in trouble, and so they called a timeout. Yeah, Coach Howard said, I didn't like that. And I told him I won't forget it. Well, wait a second. You won't forget what? The fact that the opposing team called a timeout as the game was over and you were full court press? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It starts with the pettiness there, which carried over to immaturity, which carried over to unacceptable behavior. When Juwan Howard decided to reach over people, and I don't know what was said to him by the assistant. I don't know why he chose him. I think there are multiple people who did wrong in this situation, but only one who hit somebody, and that was Juwan Howard. And whether it was a punch, which it was not, or a slap, it doesn't matter. It's unacceptable, and it cannot be done. When you have a 19-year-old do it, you can play it off as immature, bad decision, whatever it may be. But when the head coach does it, it crosses a line that you just can't ignore. Juwan Howard should be suspended multiple games. I don't know who will be doing the suspending and how many games it will be, but surely it's something. You cannot hit somebody unless you are a fighter, and he is not. Juwan Howard continues to mess up. Second time. That's a problem. Is 3 strikes and you're out the situation here at Michigan? I don't think he should be fired for this, but he has to figure out and understand he has to do something different, because his behavior in 2 different instances now of unacceptable actions, the way that he went after people, didn't hit anybody, the way he went after people before, and now hitting somebody this time, it's going to catch up to him quickly. And so hopefully he can figure it out and remain the head coach of Michigan. Now, Will Wade from LSU, if he were to slap another coach, or for that sake, slap a baby, LSU still wouldn't fire that scumbag. But another story for another day. Other things going on in the sports world this week. How about Brian Flores finding himself a job? He's suing the NFL for reasons we've talked about in the past. He gets hired in Pittsburgh. A great landing spot for him. He'll be a defensive assistant and a linebackers coach there in Pittsburgh. And it really is a perfect fit for him, an opportunity to continue a coaching career and until he gets done with the lawsuit and maybe eventually get the opportunity to be an NFL coach again. I think he's a great NFL head coach. I think he deserved a job this year. And I think that in choosing to sue the league, he lost out on probably the opportunity to coach Houston, but I'm not sure that that's one he wanted anyhow. Not a great job available there. So he figured I'll take a swing for it and see what happens. And, maybe he's the next Pittsburgh coach. Maybe that's something that's kind of going to be in the waiting now. I don't know. Just an idea thrown out there for you there. Another former coach who has not been a head coach here super recently, not in the NFL, but Charlie Strong. Miami Cristobal decides to bring him in. He is building quite the staff down there at the U. And Charlie Strong will go on as a linebacker coach at Miami. And intriguing for sure. An opportunity there for him to do something good as well. So a lot of things happening. It's NBA All-Star Weekend. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care about the NBA All-Star Weekend. The NBA is not what it used to be. Not as fun, at least for me, to watch until playoff time. Regular season All-Star stuff just doesn't intrigue me that much. But nonetheless, when the playoffs come, we'll pay attention for sure. So I didn't do much watching of the NBA All-Star game. Not sure if you did or not. Just not our cup of tea, so to say. We want to talk about the Daytona 500, though, Before we do that, I want to take a quick break. We're going to hear a word about the Sports Podcast Award, something we have been very fortunate to be nominated for. And after that, we'll come back and talk Daytona 500.
What's going on, Belly Up sports fans? Thanks for tuning in to the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. We have some really exciting news for several Belly Up Podcast Network shows. The Sports Stove Podcast, the Rough Cut Sportscast, and Here in Puckburg have all been nominated for a Sports Podcast Award. So head on over to sportspodcastawards.com and make sure to vote for the Sports Stove Podcast for Best College Sports Podcast and Best News and Current Affairs Podcast. Vote for the Rough Cut Sportscast for Best American Football Podcast, and vote for Here in Puckburg for Best Winter Sports Podcast. Again, that website is sportspodcastawards.com. Thanks for being the best part of Belly Up Sports. We are what they aren't.
Welcome back into the Sports Stove Podcast, presented by Belly Up Fantasy Baseball, live every Sunday, 8 p.m., live on Belly Up Fantasy's Facebook and Twitter page, also available on the Belly Up Sports TV network, on Roku or Tiki Live app on all other streaming televisions. We have been talking about NASCAR. On Friday, we had a guest on. Matt came on to talk about NASCAR and the Daytona 500 and all that kind of stuff. And I was telling him, and I'll tell you again, they're drawing me back in. It's been maybe even 7 years since I really paid attention to NASCAR. I just got out of it for a while. It didn't appeal to me for whatever reason after following it for several years. This year, the Clash in LA, the Coliseum, it kind of started to pull me back in. Now I've been listening to podcasts, specifically the Dale Jr. Download with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and the Burton Continuum that comes out of Dirty Mo Media and things like that. And so that was kind of pulling me back in, I suppose, all this time. But the Clash, I was really intrigued by it. So I decided, here we go. We're going to dive in. So I chose the guys that I cheered for, mainly Dale Jr., but the guys I cheered for back when I followed the racing before, they're not there anymore. All those guys are retired and gone. So I had to pick some new drivers. So I picked Harrison Burton and Chase Briscoe as the drivers that I'm going to kind of follow and cheer for, whatever it may be. And early on in the Daytona 500, Harrison Burton got wrecked out. Brad Keselowski spun him out, caused all kinds of trouble, and he was done for the day. So that was kind of sad. I thought, oh, sorry there to the Burtons for picking Harrison to cheer for, and immediately it was bad luck for him. Then the race went on, and Brad Keselowski caused another big accident. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got wrecked by him, or spun, whatever, by him, and so that was kind of a painful way to go. I started to think, I don't know that I want Brad Keselowski behind me if I'm racing in NASCAR this year. So we'll see how that all goes. But this Daytona 500, it was exciting. It held my interest all the way through. It was fun to watch, and I'm back. I'm all in NASCAR. I hope that you'll welcome me back, because I'm back in there and following that. Austin Cindric gets the win in his rookie season, first full year as a full-time driver in NASCAR. He pulls out the victory. He had to block his teammate and then run down the track and try to block out Bubba Wallace as well. But he crosses the finish line first. Bubba Wallace comes in second. And then Chase Briscoe, what a day for him. He was at one point a lap down. He battled all the way through, ends up finishing third. Of course, there was a big wreck there as Cindric went up to block his teammate, and then everything kind of happened behind him. But so it goes Austin Cindric, Bubba Wallace, Chase Briscoe, 1, 2, 3. And an exciting time for them for sure. And an exciting day for a rookie. You don't win the Daytona 500 very often as a rookie. And he did. So the start of NASCAR season is among us. I'm really intrigued by it. I tell you what, after not watching for so many years, to be able to just dive right back into it. There are still guys that are familiar with, guys that were there when I watched before, but the guys that I really liked aren't there anymore. So I wasn't sure how it would go. Kids weren't super happy that I was watching NASCAR all day, but who cares? I had a good time with that as well. On to Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball announced this week the spring training is being postponed until at the earliest March the 5th. Of course, the lockout's still going on. We got to get this solved. I mean, Major League Baseball continues to drop opportunities to flush them down the toilet. They had a chance in the COVID year to be the only sport on television and nothing. They're an outdoor sport. They have built-in social distancing in most cases, and they still didn't play. They waited for football to come back and for basketball to come back. And then at that time, the competition was too fierce. If Major League Baseball is ever going to grow the sport again, they're going to have to get a lot smarter about these things. Now we come into the fall. NFL is done. There should be the excitement about spring training, and there isn't because there's a lockout going on. The Players Association, granted, they have every right to hold out at this point. They need, just being fair, it makes more sense for them to earn more money and to have some of these things that they're asking for. Major League Baseball is standing their ground as well. There's been a little bit of give both ways, but not enough to get anywhere close to a deal. So as of right now, Major League Baseball says spring training will start March the 5th. And then, of course, the season would follow. How long will we wait? I think we're talking about mid-March probably before spring training starts. So maybe another 2-week delay or so. And then back in. Worst case scenario, I think we're not playing baseball till June. But I just feel like it's going to happen sooner rather than later in this situation. But they still have a ways to go and a ways to work. We would just like to think that they will work hard on both sides to actually make a deal that works. And I know that's asking a lot from millionaires, but that's what we're going to ask for anyways. As I mentioned before, Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live kicked off. Is that the right term for a baseball show? Started the previewed on Sunday night, and Kevin Wilson and I, we host the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live every Sunday at 8 p.m. And this week we did a position ranking. We started our position rankings with pitchers, and we're not going to give you the whole conversation, but I want you to hear the part that we talked about with the starting pitchers and our rankings. Me and Kevin did a top 10. We had a guest, Dan D'Amico, joined us. He's the Belly Up Sports head of the baseball department, and he joined us for this conversation as well and added some things to it. So we're just going to give you a segment of that program, let you hear the rankings, and then you can catch the entirety of the show on Belly Up Fantasy Live's podcast. There, it's also available on the Belly Up Fantasy Facebook and Twitter pages as well. But for now, let's give you that segment of the pitcher rankings from Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live here that was aired this Sunday.
So as I was saying, when it comes to baseball, pitching is where it all begins. We could talk about anything else, hitting, fielding, whatever else. It starts with pitching. I think we'd all agree with that. And so we are going to talk this first episode about who do we think are the top 10 pitchers in fantasy, starting pitchers. And Vince, since you are the birthday boy, we're going to let you lead off and you go ahead and tell us who you think are the top 10 starting pitchers in fantasy.
All right, so I'll give you my top 10 starting pitchers here, and we've tried to put together a little picture that maybe can help us understand. Let's see if it'll pop up. There it is. All right, so we went a little different this year. I have to preference any of my rankings with the fact that I am a Brewers fan. I try very hard when I'm doing sports talk to not let those biases sneak in. Okay. That being said, I wanted to put Corbin Burns number 1, but I felt like that was too much of a homer move. So I went with Jacob Degrom. Now, Degrom has, and I'll get your guys' thoughts on these in a second, but Degrom has the stuff. He's got injury issues, no doubt. But I feel like if, which is the big question, he can stay healthy, he's the best pitcher in the league. Well, we saw it at Garrett Cole last year. When you take away his spider tack, he wasn't as effective as he was with his spider tack, which was true for several pitchers. But so I'm going to go Degrom 1, Corbin Burns 2. I'm going to drop Cole down to 3, and I think he's solid. I would take him for sure, but I have him behind those guys. Brandon Woodruff up there at number 4. He's steady. solid along the way. Max Scherzer at 5. I almost thought lower for Scherzer just because of his age, but he seems like he still has it. He's going to be put in a good situation in the Mets, I think, as well. They're a team to watch this year. Walker Buehler, number 6. I'm a little lower on him than a lot of different people. Let's see here. Fantasy Pros has Walker Buehler at number 4. Yahoo has him at number 3. And ESPN has him number 6, right where I've got him as well. So that general area. Zach Wheeler with Philadelphia, number 7. Bieber at Cleveland, number 8. I love Alcantara in Miami. And I may be saying that wrong. I apologize if I am. But I love what he can possibly do and the stuff that he has as well. So I've got him at 9. And then Shohei Ohtani, and we probably need to talk about him at number 10. But he's dynamic, but again, can he stay healthy? Can he get through? Honestly, the more I think about it, that might be a little high for Ohtani, but that's where I've got him at this point in the season. That could change come draft time in a month, but so that's my top 10. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, we have to emphasize that this is, of course, subject to change.
Yes.
And just, Vince, I have to agree with you when it comes to Jacob Degrom. When he is healthy, he's far and away the best pitcher in the league. But we don't know if he's healthy. I've got him on my list, which will come up in a few minutes, but I don't have him at number 1. But that's the biggest question. If we need spring training so we can answer what he looks like going into the season, because if he's not healthy, he can go way fast off the our top pitcher list to the do not draft list in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So, you talk about how you're a Brewers homer, but I have to agree with you. You got to like what Milwaukee's doing. They've got 2 of the top, because I've got, I got him, Burns at number 2, and I got Woodruff at number 6. So at the very worst, you got 2 of the top 6 pitchers in all of baseball on your team. So that worked out. So
I got Freddie Peralta at number 11. Now, most people have him around the 16, 17, 18 range. But Freddie Peralta is young and talented. And I got him up there too, but I don't like some of those other guys that are in that 8-20 range in most people's list.
Okay, so we could talk about Garrett Cole for a minute, because I think, you talk about the spider tack thing, which even though he had that last year, he still, when you look at him, he had, when he was 16-8, he made 30 starts. Let's see, he had a 3.23 ERA, his 106 WHIP, which is outstanding. So even though he had his issues, he was figuring it out, towards the end of the season. Now he's had the entire offseason. I think he's going to be back at the top of his game. So, he's a Yankee, and you talk about putting away your biases, which I hate the Yankees with every fiber of my being. But when we're talking about analysis, we got to analysis the best we can. So I think you had a great list here.
Dan, what are your thoughts on that? Those 10 guys.
Well, I've got a very similar 10. I've got rankings here. I don't think we have a nice fancy graphic for me, but
I don't.
But Jacob Degrom, like you said, if he's healthy, he is the best pitcher in baseball, and arguably the best pitcher in the past, however far back you want to go.
Yeah.
We had a 1.08 ERA last season in 15 starts. But like you said, the injuries are there. He turns 34 in June. So there are those question marks about his health. But if he is healthy, he will be the best pitcher in baseball. He will be the best pitcher on your fantasy roster if you draft him. And he'll probably take you to a championship because ESPN has him I think ranked 8th is what I saw. So if you can get him somewhere in that 7 to 10 range in terms of starting pitchers, and he stays healthy, that's a guy that can win you a fantasy baseball league.
Yeah, you said it. ESPN, when I put him down, and they could have changed since then, they had him at number 10. Yahoo had him at number 6. And then Fantasy Pros had him at number 5. So some people are still having some confidence in him. Other people have definitely lost the faith that he can be, one of those top five pitchers for you.
Yeah, and then moving down the list, Garrett Cole is a fantastic pitcher. I don't think anyone will debate that. But like Kevin said, he figured it out a little bit at the end of last year, but a 3.97 ERA in his 17 starts after the MLB cracked down on the spider tack is a little bit concerning.
Yeah.
And he has had a full off season now to adjust, to figure out something else that could get him some extra grip on the baseball, especially in April in New York. Not going to be very warm. But you can't doubt a guy with Garrett Cole's pedigree.
Hmm. I like it.
Yep. That's what we're talking about right there. So we're going to switch over right now to my top 10 list, which I have Garrett Cole leading. I was very, very, very hesitant putting him up at the top of the list. But, as I was saying, I think he's going to figure it out. And you look at, he did struggle after the whole spotter tack thing. But you look at his, he's been right at or below his 1.00 whip last 4 seasons. So you can pretty much count him into what he's going to do throughout the whole season. So I got him at number 1. I got Burns at number 2. And he's not going to walk just 6 guys or whatever it was coming into this season. But he's got the stuff maybe as nasty as anybody. And so he's only I didn't write down how old he is, but it was only his first season starting. And if he does this again this year, he's number 1 easily going into next season. And I don't want to be biased, but I got Walker Buehler at number 3. I think that he is ready to really take, he was 16-4. And so if that's the worst you're going to get out of him, that's, top starter stuff. And then Max Scherzer, unfortunately, he's now on the New York Mets. But, as you said, he's older. But for this season, I think he can still bring it. He's got a good situation pitching in New York. And so I like him there. And then we got Degrom. We've talked about him. And then your man, Mr. Woodruff at number 6. And the only thing that I might have bumped him up a little bit, but he was only 9-10 a year ago. And there are certain pitchers who, for whatever reason, the clubs just won't support that guy. Mm. And we could talk about Degrom because he's one of them as well. He'd give up 1 run and lose. So it looks to me like maybe Woodruff might be in that same situation. I hope not, because he is a heck of a pitcher. And then at number 7, I got Zach Wheeler. And Dan can probably enlighten us a little bit more about him. Let's see here. He struck out 247 guys a year ago. So, and only walked 46. So you got to like that. And then I got Shane Bieber at number 8. And, he had some injury problems a year ago, but, we're talking about the guy who won the Triple Crown of pitching the year before that. So I really like him. And, I don't want to be a homer again, but I got Julio Rice at number 9. This guy was 19-3 a year ago. And this is a guy that, if you need a starter, he's a starter. They can put him in the bullpen. So he's extremely versatile. And then just like you, Vince, I got Shohei Ohtani at number 10. And he only won 9 games. Maybe it's a situation, as we talked about earlier, where he just, can't get the run support unless he's hitting them himself. But he did everything he could a year ago, and he was coming off an injury the year before. So, they were a little bit, they left him so he didn't have to pitch a whole lot of innings a year ago. But I think he's going to be fully engaged this year, so I like him at number 10.
Dan, I'll let you give your thoughts on Kevin's rankings first.
Well, I completely agree with Walker Buehler being up here in the top 5, especially if and let me say this, make sure you know your leagues, what your league scores, how your league scores, what is important in your league. Because if your league uses innings pitched as a good thing, Walker Buehler and Zach Wheeler are 2 guys that you want to roster. Both of them went over 200 innings. Both of them struck out a whole lot of batters.
Yes, he did.
And they're both very good at what they do. And Corbin Burns, another guy, unbelievable, won the Cy Young, led the MLB in a number of categories, but only gave you 170 innings or so.
Mm-hmm.
So while I agree,
167.
Corbin Burns is fantastic, and I'm not going to take anything away from him. But if you're in a league that values innings pitched, Walker Buehler and Zach Wheeler are guys that could sneak ahead of Corbin Burns.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. That's good stuff. My comments on Brandon Woodruff. I agree with you, Kevin. It seems like when Woodruff's on the mound, the Brewers players, the offensive players, kind of felt like, oh, all we got to do is get 1 run and we'll be okay. And then they would lose 2-1, something like that. I think we'll talk about this as we get into position players. I think the Brewers' offense will be much better this year than it was last year. And I think that's going to help Brandon Woodruff in a number of areas as well. But Burns is clearly the guy in Milwaukee right now. He's young. He's got his stuff's a little hotter than Woodruff, although Woodruff's a phenomenal pitcher as well. But you nailed it, Dan. Corbin Burns and his innings pitched, I don't think that's going to change much. Craig Counsell is a very forward-thinking manager, and he thinks analytically, and he makes some weird, usually good decisions. But when you're talking about fantasy baseball, it definitely hurts you a little bit in some areas. Burns will still give you the strikeouts. He'll still give you wins. He'll still give you a decent ERA. But when it comes to innings pitched, Burns is not going to be the guy for you. Woodruff, on the other hand, he's going to pitch. I don't know if you got it in front of you, Kevin, but Woodruff's going to pitch more innings than Burns. Burns
he had 179 in the third last year, Vince. So that's we're talking about 2021. That's decent innings for a starting pitcher.
Yeah.
1982, maybe not so much, but
yeah.
And when you have Devin Williams and Josh Hader waiting in the bullpen, it's a lot easier to trust your bullpen to get those last outs.
That's for sure.
When Craig Counsell is looking at two of the top 10 relievers in baseball in his bullpen, as opposed to Joe Girardi, who's basically looking at a dumpster fire out there in the Citizens Bank Park bullpen. So Zach Wheeler, even 100 pitches in, is still probably the best guy you want to go with.
Yeah, and just be thankful you're not a Reds fan. I'm telling you, that bullpen, yikes. Philadelphia's not a ton better. That's
no. They were marginally better than 2020, but the bar was not very high coming off a season in which they had statistically, I think, the second worst bullpen of all time.
So that is clips from the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball live show. I'm sorry we're having internet issues, and I think it's affecting our quality a bit there. So I apologize for that. You should be able to listen to the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball live show on Belly Up Fantasy Live's podcast and hear the full episode in better quality and everything there as well for you there. And again, you can tune in live every Sunday, 8 p.m. It's on the Belly Up Fantasy Twitter and Facebook pages, as well on Belly Up Sports TV network that you can get on your Roku device or the Tiki Live app on the Belly Up channel on the Tiki Live app on all your other streaming televisions. You can always look it up in your web browser at bellyup.tv. Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Of course, our show airs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the Sports Stove, 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. replays as well. You can always catch the entire audio versions in the podcast as well. All right, a busy weekend, and we've come to the end of it. Now we're into the new week. A lot of things ahead. Here in Kentucky, where I live, we've got high school district playoffs this week for basketball, and then regionals next week, and then state to follow. So a busy weekend ahead here as well. Our Wednesday episode will be our local hour. We cover EKU sports. Right now we've got one guest scheduled to be here, Michael Moreno, basketball player for the EKU Colonels. He'll be back with us for a second time, and excited to talk with him as they're getting ready to head into the A-Sun tournament. So tune in on Wednesday for that episode. And then Friday, my dad will join me, and we'll discuss all the latest sports news and everything going on in the sports world. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Sports Stove podcast. We'll be back here again later this week. Follow us on social media at Sports Stove on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, feel free to reach out, comment on our social media, email us, thesportstove@gmail.com with any comments you have about today's program. Like, subscribe, share, all those good things as well. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to go to the sportspodcastawards.com, and vote for the Sports Stove. We are nominated in 2 categories: best news and current affairs podcast, and then also best college sports podcast, which recognizes our Wednesday episode, the local hour there as well. All right. Again, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Until next time, we'll see you around the sports.